Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to Soul Talks with Alka. So they say life doesn't come with a manual, but it comes with a mom. And if your mom happens to be Orah, you are in good shape. With me, I have Orah. Welcome, Orah.
Thank you, Alka.
Orah is one of the most phenomenal moms that I have ever met. And I'm getting goosebumps while I'm introducing her. But in any lifetime, if I ever have a problem, if I have to choose a mother, I think I would choose Orah as my mom. She is an amazing, amazing woman. And with that, I will let Orah tell you a little bit about herself. And Orah, literally, I have goosebumps all down my back.
Okay, I'm going to have tears. My name is Orah.
Yes.
And I am a mother of 2 adult children. My daughter, Jackie, is 36 years old, and our son my son Brian, is 34 years old. And he is an individual with developmental disabilities. Mm-hmm. And he was diagnosed at the age of 5 with a genetic disorder called Fragile X syndrome. And it's a genetic disorder in that it passes from either the mother or the father to the child. And I, unbeknownst to anyone, including myself, am a carrier of this.
Oh, okay.
And so every child has a 50-50 chance. Our daughter Jackie does not have it. Brian does. And in addition to that, he was diagnosed with autism in his early 30s. And the two have a lot of similarities.
Okay.
So if you know someone with autism, you may have some idea of what the challenges are.
So when he was diagnosed when he was 5, was it something that you knew, like it's something that he was, how did you know that, there's something wrong?
I knew there was something wrong by the time he was about a year. The signs were telling me something was off.
Okay.
And of course we went to the doctors, and as typical for doctors, and doctors will tell you, most kids all catch up. Well, the reality is they don't all catch up.
Yeah.
And that's what parents want to hear.
Right.
And so by the time he was 2.5, I knew there was definitely an issue. And we went to a neurologist and we enrolled him in early intervention, which is available for children from the ages of 3 and up, something you need to know. And he started early intervention, and a doctor when he was 5 recognized the signs of this genetic disorder, Fragile X syndrome, and asked me to have a blood test.
That's not very common,
It's
right?
not common,
So
no.
for someone to recognize it.
She did. She recognized the signs, and I was always so thankful that she did. So we got a definitive diagnosis of that. And it was important because it is a genetic disorder, and every child is 50-50 chance of having it. It certainly led us to the conclusion that we most likely would not have any more children. And because I do have an identical twin sister and an older sister who are also carriers, that also impacted on their decisions.
Right, obviously. So what happens, how was Brian different from other children?
Other children? At age 5, he had no language.
Okay.
No language. And he was still not toilet trained. He had a lot of sensory issues. He cried a great deal. And of course, by the time your child is 3 or 4 with no language, there's something wrong. And so we began the process of trying to determine what was best for him as far as schooling. And back in the early 90s, children like Brian were automatically put in segregated settings.
That's right.
And so that's what we did at age 5, because that's what schools do.
Yeah.
And he entered a private school just for kids with disabilities, and they put him in another classroom with other kids who had no language. And he came home and started to bang his head a great deal. And when I visited the school, I realized that the other children, some of them had quite significant issues with that, and they wore helmets. And I said, wait a minute, he's seeing what everybody else is doing, which is not a good thing.
Yeah.
And so he's banging his head. And at that time, there was absolutely nothing available on information on Fragile X syndrome. There was no internet, there were no books, there was nothing really. And so we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants. And at that time, at age 5, I started to get involved with an organization called Statewide Parent Advocacy Network, which is a network for helping families who have children with disabilities.
So say that name again so that people
Statewide Parent Advocacy Network. It's called SPAN, S-P-A-N. They are located in Newark. and they are a phenomenal organization to help families navigate the world of special education. And so I attended one of their workshops, and I was so impressed. I called them and said, can I volunteer? Can I do something to help? And that was my foothold into learning how to be an advocate. And that was the beginning of my process of realizing that what Brian was doing in the private school was not a good thing. And I decided that I wanted him in our neighborhood schools.
Oh, wonderful.
And so by this time he was 7, and I went to my neighborhood school and said I would like for him to go to the school, and they looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah, that's why I said,
And
oh, wonderful.
they
They're probably
said,
thinking,
we don't
what?
do this.
Yeah.
We don't do this.
Yeah.
And my neighborhood school was not welcoming, and so we went to another school in Edison, and fortunately the principal said, absolutely, we welcome Brian here. And he started first grade, even though he was 7, because he was still very, very tiny in age, and we had a one-on-one paraprofessional, and it was the most wonderful thing I had ever seen.
Nice.
Because he started to imitate the good things, and his behaviors dissipated, and he made connections with local neighborhood kids, because we would go to the supermarket, no one would know him because he was being bused to this private school.
That's right.
And so suddenly we're in the supermarket and people saying, hey Brian, and he suddenly got this very lovely group of close kids, and it was a wonderful experience.
That's
and
awesome.
He went through elementary school and then went on to a middle school.
So at this age, what is Brian's developmental?
He was academically, I should say cognitively, he's still at this age, he's 34 now, he cannot read. He can do sight word reading. He can pick up a newspaper and find out when his favorite football team is playing, what channel they're on and who they're playing. He can recognize those things. He likes to navigate the internet. His favorite thing is space, so he will go to nasa.gov and watch all the videos of the space shuttles, going up. So he has very specific interests, but he never really learned to read, which was my goal.
Right.
He really can't write very well.
Okay.
Cognitively, I don't know what grade level he's at. His reading skill is probably kindergarten. I don't know, but
No, but I meant like in 7th grade. When
in
he's
7th grade, he's still way behind.
Way below.
And
Okay.
and my expectation, and what I tried to communicate to his teachers is, I don't expect you to do miracles. I don't expect because he's in your classroom, in a 5th grade classroom, he's going to do 5th grade work. That was never the expectation.
Right.
The goal of true inclusion is to place a child in an environment with the appropriate supports so that they can meet their goals
That's right.
amidst the general education classroom. And it is challenging and it is not easy,
Right.
but I strongly believe that is why Brian is able to navigate the real world today, because he was never isolated from that world.
Did you get resistance from the teachers for that?
Not in this school. Not
Okay.
in the school where the principal was welcoming,
Okay.
because she was sending the message to her teachers, this
Yeah.
is what we're doing, and I will support you,
Right.
and you tell me what you need to support this child.
Got it.
And from the very beginning, the teachers were amazing. His 1st grade teacher we still stay in touch with.
Oh, that's awesome.
She calls him our son,
Uh-huh.
and he's 34 years old now. He was 7.
Right.
Do the math. This is how many years he impacted on this teacher. She just still
Well, everybody
wants to
adores him.
know
We all
how she
adore him.
does.
Yeah.
So the objective was for Brian to meet his individual goals and to proceed from year to year. And we actually had the 2nd grade teacher ask to be switched to be a 2nd grade teacher so she could have Brian. And the teachers were phenomenal. And then we hit middle school and it wasn't so phenomenal. And a lot of teachers objected, and we really hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
And I made the decision after a very, very difficult time to take him out and put him in a private school again. And when I say that broke my heart, I cannot tell you. So he went back to going into a segregated school, which was, oh my gosh, it was at least an hour on the bus each way.
Oh my.
It was a disaster. The
Oh,
private
God.
school was a disaster. He was not happy. They were not happy.
Yeah, for him to be on a bus for that long.
And he acted out on the bus.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
Right.
And we had a lot of issues. He was there for 2 years, and I said, this is not going well. And I went back to the high school, which is where his age-appropriate peers were, and his friends from elementary were now in high school. And I went to the high school and said, we're back. And explained what I wanted to accomplish, and we had a one-on-one person with him, a very, very specific schedule to meet his needs. And because he went from a very small school to a school of 2,000 students, he had issues.
Of course.
And they were not happy with these issues. He would run through the halls. He would do things that were not appropriate for a high school student. And they suspended him 3 times in the first month of school.
Really?
They wanted him out.
They were going to make it difficult for you.
They were going to make it difficult. Fortunately,
They had no idea who they had.
well, you know, it was never just me. I had supports, and fortunately, I had the support of someone very high up in the school administration that went to the high school and said, "He's not leaving. You need to make this work," and they did. And I have to tell you that in the 3 years that he was there, we went from everyone wanting him out to him receiving Student Recognition Award when he graduated. They give every high school in Middlesex County 2 awards, a junior and a senior, not students with special education needs.
Normal. Yeah.
And
when I say normal, I mean like
general education.
Population. Yeah.
And he received the award for the Senior for Student Achievement Award. And someone supposedly said to someone who had thought he had no business being in that school said, "You know what?
I'm sorry.
She was right. He belongs here."
Yeah.
And it just validated what I always felt, that if he needed to be around good role models, and he needed to be around people who behaved appropriately and didn't have the behaviors, and then he didn't have the behaviors. And we needed to be supportive and patient.
Yeah, so what do you do as a parent, right? You go out in the grocery store, and if Brian acts out, what do you do as a parent? When in school, obviously somebody's watching him. So school, there's a staff, but you still have to be a big advocate for him.
Sure.
But when you're going out into normal day-to-day behavior, what is it like to be with Brian?
It can be difficult. You have to know your child. And one of the things that I most highly recommend for any parent who goes through this process, the number one thing that I did for myself was to become informed. You need to educate yourself about what the rights are of students with disabilities in the world. 100%. In the United States, there are rights, and you have rights.
Yes.
And if I found that if the people I was trying to collaborate with felt that I didn't know my rights, they would try not to offer them.
Exactly.
If I knew what his rights were, and I clearly spelled them out and said, I understand he's entitled to this and this and this. Yeah. And then their demeanor changed, and it was like, okay, we can't pull the wool over this one's eyes. Yes. And so become informed, become educated. There are resources out there. Educate yourself. That is the number one piece of advice that I would say to all families.
That I think is the best. If you're an informed consumer,
yes,
you have to be the best advocate for your child.
And there was a
Sims. Yes, an educated consumer is our best customer. Yes.
That's absolutely right. And an educated parent is a child's best advocate.
Yes.
Because you know what you can ask for, you know what you are entitled to get, because schools will not offer them to you on a silver platter.
Yeah. Because it's costly. It's
It's
money for them, right? And they don't want to do it.
Of course.
They're going to try and figure it out.
Right. So that is the key piece of advice. The other piece of advice that I got from a wonderful woman that I worked for at the Statewide Parent Advocacy Network, I not advice so much, I watched the way that she operated. And she was not adversarial. She was very much a collaborator. And she felt that the way to get what you wanted was to not go in with that pushy, shovey, I know what I'm entitled to and I demand I get it.
Yeah.
Instead, I learned that you need to say to them, I want to work with you to do what's best for my son.
Yes.
And to this day, all of the people that I worked with in the school system are my friends. As a matter of fact, we're having breakfast with the principal of the elementary school on Monday, and we just spent an hour at the high school visiting, and I just felt it was important to not come in sometimes parents are forced to, they have no choice.
Yeah.
But I felt from the very beginning it was really, really important to say to them, I want to work together as a team.
But it also, if you come in from a place of entitlement, right, you get less help. I think if you come in from a place of saying, listen, I understand what my what I'm entitled to,
Right.
but I need you to help me.
Right.
I think
There's
they
a
also
difference.
feel like, you know what,
Right.
we want to work together.
Right. I always said there's a difference between being aggressive and assertive.
Yes.
And there's a very big difference.
Huge difference, yes.
And so that was how I handle things. And to this day, I feel like it's best to try and approach people with a let's work together attitude, as opposed to I'm going to hit you over the head with a hammer if I don't get what I want.
Right.
And so that is another piece of advice. Be assertive, be firm, but be collaborative.
Yeah.
When you can.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because even Brian sees that, right? So when he goes with you, or when you're out talking to somebody, if he sees you as aggressive,
Sure.
then that aggressive
Sure.
behavior in his personality
Right.
will also come
Sure.
out, right?
And
Because
that is how, when you ask, how do I deal with him in the supermarket? My feeling has always been to be very, and I've learned this because of the experiences, if I come at him angry and stop doing that, when we get home, you're going to blah, 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 it riles him up,
Yeah.
and he gets more aggressive, and then you get into a battle and you will never win.
That's right.
And so I have learned to be very calm and speak in a very calm tone. And yes, there are expectations. We don't do this in the store. And most of the time that's effective. And I have to say, I'm lucky. This is the piece that I think inclusion was so crucial. He is aware of what's appropriate in public.
Oh, wow.
He knows you don't bang your head when you go to a store. He has seen through his entire school career, this is how we behave in school. And so he doesn't act that way.
Yeah.
You put 6 kids who have behavior issues in a class, they feed off of each other. Teachers tell you this all the time.
Yeah.
And it becomes this cyclical, well, I'm going to do one better than him. I'm going to throw the chair across the room.
Right.
Well, Brian didn't see that kind of behavior, and he didn't do it. And a teacher said to me, what is all this behavior you're talking about? What are you talking about? I haven't seen any of this. I said, that's because he's not doing it. Believe me, if he was doing it, you would be aware of it.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He said, okay, this is what we do in first grade. We don't do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think growing up, he learned. And everyone will say, and because he does misbehave mostly at home, and I believe that is, I truly believe that is the sense that he knows there's a zero reject in my home. He is loved no matter what. We are never going to kick him out. So when he spends all day, if he's at his job, he's doing something, and it takes a lot of effort to hold things together a lot of times. Yeah. And when he gets home, sometimes he's just like, I'm going to let it go. And we're the ones that pay the price, but I'd rather do it to us than out on his job.
Right.
And so...
And which is nice. We're going to get to that Brian is working.
Yes.
And he's
a productive,
member
contributing member of society. Right.
Which is
that was my goal.
Yes.
That was, we don't want our kids sitting home watching television when they leave school.
Yeah.
And so he had a job from the minute he graduated the high school. He had a trainee, an internship, and they eventually hired him, and he was there until we moved out of state. And he ultimately did get jobs in North Carolina, and not wonderful, amazing jobs, but he's busy. He has a schedule. He has something to do every day of the week. He earns a paycheck, little paycheck, but he's very proud of it.
Yeah, it's an accomplishment for him.
He's proud. He does things. He has a life. And that's what any parent wants for their child, regardless.
So when he got a job here, to start the process, I think is the hardest, right?
Right.
What was your role in getting him that job?
Well, again, it's knowing what you are entitled to. And so knowing that students with disabilities have transition rights, and there are things in place to get a child who's transitioning into adulthood into the correct steps to get towards that job. The goal is the last day of school and the first day after graduation should be the same. And so my goal when he was in high school is to spend less time in the school and more time in the community. And so we went to an agency and said, we want a job coach. We want somebody going out there knocking on doors and saying, will you hire this individual?
So you actually hired a job coach?
you have the ability to go to an agency, vocational rehab. They have the ability to, you choose the agency that you want, and they hire the job coach, and they will go out with Brian to explore the community and say, how do we know what kind of a job he wants? You know, let's explore, let's take him to a store, let's take him to a restaurant, let's take him here and there and see what he's interested in, and see what will be possible for him to do. And so we had someone who worked with him, and ironically, I found a position for him because I was at a conference in Chicago and was on the bus to the airport and was talking to someone who lived in Edison, and she had she ran a job agency and said, I have a position for him at an assisted living center, or I have the possibility of a training. And that's where he went, and he was there for the last year of his high school. He would spend some hours at the high school and then go to the assisted living center and volunteer there initially, and they eventually hired him for a position.
Right, because once you see him, right, then you see what his capability is, you see what his demeanor is.
And they put him in the dish room, and the wonderful chef that was in the kitchen said, I think he can do more than that. I want him in the kitchen. And Brian likes to cook. And he said, I want you in the kitchen with me. And he became sort of like his helper in the kitchen. And they said, he was fantastic. He said, I would be at the oven stirring things, and I turn around and Brian would be standing with the bowl ready for me. He said it was like he could read my mind. He knew exactly what the next step was.
So
it goes from the bowl to the pan. And so he was a wonderful advocate for Brian. He said, I know you can do more. I can see this.
That's awesome.
And so he had that, and he loved it. He loved it. And then we moved away. So we had to start all over again.
Which is, you know, it showed him change. It was a lot of change for him.
And one of my favorite sayings is the only constant in life is change. And you have to be prepared for that.
Yes. And you were very good at this.
Not so much, but we try. We do the best that we can.
So how do you and Joe handle this? So like both of you obviously you have two kids, right? So how do you both handle when there is stress with Brian? Because it can get a lot.
Yes,
get to be a lot. It's not so easy.
No,
like you're
it's
making
not
it
all.
sound
It's
really
not all
peachy,
pie in the
but
sky.
It's
not. And there have been quite a lot of difficulties in the recent past. More so with Brian's relationship with Joe, and I think he always sees Joe as the third wheel. It's like, hey, no, it's me and Mom. Like, what are you doing here? Go away. And they get along well more when I'm not around. 3 is a tough number, and the dynamics of the 3 of us is difficult. And so I tend to either do something with Brian alone, or Joe does something with him alone. Okay. When it's the 3 of us, there's a lot of tension and issues.
Got it.
And so we tend to do things separately. And I think the most difficult piece of all of this is that Joe and I can't do anything. Brian cannot be left alone for more than a few hours tops. So we're not able to travel together.
I see your vacations are generally separate.
Yes, we are separate vacations, but that's how we do it. We want to go on vacation, we can't do it together, so you do what you want, I'm going to do what I want. And it's sad, but that's the reality. And until he moves out of the house, there's really no other way to get around that. Yeah,
but you've been dealt a hand, and you're playing that hand really well.
You have to.
Yeah.
You make the best of what you have. And to be honest, I am not the world's optimist by any means, but I realize that you have to. I am very thankful for what I have. And I'm really very thankful for what Brian has, because I know it could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
And I really am thankful that he understands me. Yeah. He may not be able to communicate because his communication is very limited, but he understands everything that I say. And I am so thankful for that, because I understand, for kids who have autism and they don't understand, and the frustration level, must be incredible. But so I am thankful that I can say something to him and he will understand me. Yes. And so I try and look at what I have, not what I don't have.
Yes.
And I think that took a long time, especially in the beginning. You go through a grieving process. There's no doubt about it.
Because it's like, why me?
Right. And why him?
And
why
him?
does he have to go through life like this?
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part that you do have to, and I don't believe you get over it and then you move on. There were stages when Brian's friends started driving and went to college and now, getting married. You are always beginning that grieving process again for a new stage in life.
Yes.
And so that you go forward and then you go back and you go forward. So it's never, okay, I got over it the first 2 years and I'm done and everything's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a constant.
Yeah.
And what gives me all these gray hairs is what will happen to
But
him
you
when
look
we're
great.
gone. Oh, thank you.
I love the salt and pepper look. I love it. You look awesome.
Thank you, Alka. I love you.
You do.
It's the fear of what will happen when we're gone.
Yes.
That is the biggest fear.
So how do you prepare for that? So for people who have, I have a lot of clients who have, and I was corrected by you. You were the first one to correct me because I said autistic kids. And you said, no, Alka, that's not the right way to say it. And I still remember it. And you said it's children with autism.
Yes.
Because it is,
people first language.
Yeah.
However, what's interesting is that people with autism say, you know what, I am an autistic person. And I have no problem with you calling me that. So it's kind of swinging back the other way now.
Good, that's
but
pride.
I prefer identifying the person before the disability. So I don't say I have an autistic child. But some people are fine with it, and I think you have to respect whatever they want.
But I always begin with a person with autism.
And I think that's the safe way to go.
Yeah. And I will thank you forever for that. But I have clients who have that. Now, they're always the same fear, right? What is going to happen to my child when I'm gone? So what do you do to prepare for that?
It's really wonderful when you have siblings who say, don't worry, Mom and Dad. He'll always be taken care of.
Right.
We have one other daughter who's older, and she lives in New York, and we live in North Carolina,
Right.
and I have never had expectations that she would have that. I would not want to put that. It is a burden on her. And so I assume I have to go on with planning as if he's an only child.
Right.
And so there are things in place that you can do. There are trusts that you can put in place.
Got it.
Because you have to be very, very careful with assets for people with disabilities. If they have more than $2,000 in their name, they could lose Social Security. So you have to be really, really careful about this kind of thing.
So there's attorneys for this?
Well, there's a special needs trust, which allows you to put money in their name, in the trust's name, but not them. So Brian cannot have a bank account with $2,001 in it.
Okay.
Because that will bump him right out of Social Security. But he can have a special needs trust with $10,000 in it. And if someone leaves him money, they put it in the special needs trust. And that goes into effect mostly when we're gone.
Yeah.
But you can allocate the special needs trust to have money to take care of his needs when we're gone. Not housing needs, but his needs wherever he's living. So if he wants to go on vacation, if he wants to buy clothes, that kind of thing.
His living living expenses.
So living expenses, but not housing.
Right.
So my goal would be to, number one, hopefully that eventually in a couple of years he will move out of the house with the supports from North Carolina.
Yeah, that was your goal, right?
That is my goal.
Yeah, that was your goal when you moved from here.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Little did I know that when we moved to North Carolina, we're 9 years on the waiting list and still waiting. Hopefully nothing will happen to us till he gets this, but that will enable him for us to move him into something of his own. Mm-hmm. And what this waiver, the Medicaid waiver, will provide are the supports that he needs to live in that home. So I envision him living in his own apartment with a support person from maybe 5 to 8 hours a day to take him shopping because he can't drive, take him to his jobs, help him with his meals. He's okay to go to sleep at night and be left. And now technology is an amazing thing. There are cameras, so I can install video cameras in his apartment and I can check on him and say he's okay, or whoever will be there when we're gone.
Right.
So technology is really making a huge, huge impact in the ability of people to be more independent. But I would have never said this 5 years ago. So, but until he gets that waiver, I cannot afford for him to live in an apartment and pay for those supports ourselves.
Right.
I want to pay somebody $15 an hour, 5 to 8 hours a week. A day. 7 days a week. Do the math. Who can afford that?
Right.
So we are on a waiting list, and I hope that it comes sooner than later. That I think all of us want to envision that our child is living somewhere supported And my goal is for him to be in a community.
Yes.
An inclusive community.
An inclusive community, yes.
Where there are, and my drive now is to create an intentional community where all people of all ages and diversity live, and they all recognize that they're all neighbors and they all take care of each other. And that might sound pie in the sky, but it's happening. There are intentional communities being built in the United States. And so we decided in North Carolina that we want to try and create that.
Really?
So we created a nonprofit called HOPE.
Oh, very nice.
And it stands for Housing Options for People with Exceptionalities. And we are looking for a developer in North Carolina who is willing to work with us to create this intentional community. And what we're asking is, if you are building a community, that you set aside 20% of the homes, units, to be for people with disabilities to live in that community.
That's awesome.
So that's our mission.
So awesome.
That's my next project.
So this whole video, I've just had goosebumps the whole time.
So that's my goal.
That's really, really awesome. And now Brian also is into like photography and things, right? Now Brian's doing that
he
too?
does photography, and Joe, as you know, does photography. So, and Brian has always had an eye. He's always taken pictures of us when he was little, and it was always perfect. Our heads were not cut off. We weren't over there. And I said, wow, he's got an eye. And so he and Joe will go out and take photographs, and he does his thing and Joe does his thing, and he comes back with really beautiful photos. And he participated in, he's had a couple of shows, and he has sold a few photographs.
Yes, I've seen his...
And so it's a thing that he likes to do, and he's good at it. Yeah. And so it's, again, an example of showing people that people with disabilities aren't just pulling from society, that they're giving to society. Yeah. And they have talents and skills and abilities, and employers love them because they're loyal, they're on time. I have to tell Brian, no, Target's is closing for the week so that you can take vacation, because he's like, no, they need me. They need me. I'm like, Brian, it's okay. They will do just fine without you.
But just imagine.
Very
I have
loyal.
to go. I have to go home.
No, Tuesday, work. I'm at work Tuesday. I said, no, you're on vacation this week, but they need me. It's like, really, they'll do fine just for that, you know. But they have that sense of wanting to give and wanting to be something that's something meaningful.
Their work ethic is extremely strong.
It is, and studies show that. They have wonderful work ethics, and I just wish more people would give them that opportunity. So to show what they can do.
But I think having parents like, and again, that's what we started with, having parents like you guys as advocates, as somebody who says, you know what, give my child a chance. Because if you don't do that, don't fight for your child, nobody's going to come home to take your child.
Right. And if you don't stretch them, you don't know what they're capable of doing. Yes. And people said to me, he will never make it in that public school. You are making a huge mistake. He'll never make it. And I said, well, all I know is that I need to try. And if it doesn't work, I can go to sleep at night and say I tried.
Right. You always have a fallback option.
Right. So how does it hurt to try? Yes, it was a lot of work, but I needed to know that I tried. That is my thing. I need to know. And my famous saying is Gandhi's, be the change you want to see in the world. Yes. And if you don't like the way things are, do something to try and change.
Yeah. Or if you're not, then don't complain.
Don't complain, right.
If you're good, right? So with that, we're going to end our segment with Orah. But before we do that, or I know you gave the takeaways for parents, but I want you to give really tell us, what are some things that a parent can do for a child with special needs?
Number one, be aware of their abilities. Don't focus on what they cannot do. Focus on what they can do, and use the things that they can do to help them overcome the things that they can't do. Number two, as I said, become informed. That is the number one key. Yes. Become informed. There are so many resources available to educate parents about what those rights are. And that is, I tell parents, I don't care what you do, get a copy of the law. It's not great reading, you will fall asleep, but you need to understand what it is. Yes, and there are people out there that will help you do that.
That's right.
So do that. Number three, don't let your child's limitations stop you from trying new things. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you an example. Brian flew on a plane for the first time since he was 4 years old. And I didn't know how he'd react. He loved it. And
I saw your post. I was like, I wanted to be on that plane.
the whole time, woohoo, woohoo. And, you know, we were in the cloud and I said, Brian, do you know where we are right now? Right now? And he was like, what? And I said, we are in the middle of a cloud. And his eyes sort of like bugged out. He was like, whoa, that is so cool.
I can just imagine him jumping up and down.
Oh, yeah, he was excited. But stretch your children. Give them opportunities. They may not be comfortable. They may be difficult. But you don't know what they're capable of doing until you give them that opportunity to try. And most of the time, I bet they will excel.
Wow.
That's, I guess, my takeaways.
That's very nice. And with that, we're going to end this wonderful, wonderful segment of Soul Talks with Alka. If you think this can help someone, if you know of someone that'll benefit from this, please, please, please share it with your friends and subscribe to Soul Talks with Alka. It has been my absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Alka.
My absolute honor. And I loved having you.
Thank you.